Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. Today we have Netflix 143rd film. It's the 2019 biographical comedy drama, The Dirt, directed by Jeff Tremaine. It stars Douglas Booth, Colson Baker, Daniel Webber, Iwan, Rheon, and Pete Davidson. I am Jesse and back again with MJ. How are you?
I'm good. I told you I'd come back. I was probably semi-committal on the last podcast as to whether I'd come back, but no, here I am, back in it, and back for a very, very different movie from what we watched last week.
Yeah, that's probably a good little segue. That this is in Australia anyway, it's R18, and I think it's probably important that we mention that there's probably a lot of things we're going to discuss that aren't very appropriate for young ears. So if you're under the age of 18, probably don't listen to this one. Well, watch this.
Not to mention, this is probably a good time to do the spoiler alert too, because if you haven't watched the film, we're going to spoil it. And if you're under 18 in Australia, you shouldn't be watching the film anyway, despite the fact that I don't know how the parental stuff, lockouts work on Netflix, but I'm sure there's plenty of 15 to 16-year-olds who know their way around it.
I think it's non-existent. I think that the way that the rating system works, it's pretty non-existent on Netflix.
Govern yourself, please, kids.
Yes, do it on your own terms and be like, when I'm 18, I'm going to watch this film. I remember when I was younger anyway. I think the 70s film Carrie. I don't know if you've seen Brian De Palma Carrie. I felt, I think I was like 15 and I went through Kmart to buy it on DVD. And I just felt so nervous putting it on the counter and I got it. So I was very happy.
Was that R, was it?
Yeah, it is
R. Okay. I still remember when Scary Movie came out. And that was MA. So that was, you had to be over 15 to watch it. And I would have been like 12 or 13. I just remember like feeling so restricted, like that there is no way that I can watch this movie. And eventually we had to hire it from Blockbuster like 6 months later once it was done. But what a feeling that was, where you actually cannot go and see a movie. It's like you need to give ID to get booze, and what a world.
Very true. Well, we should probably get back into what we're here to talk about, which is the dirt. So give us your fast flicks with your quick little summary of what this one is about.
Yeah, it's basically a balls and all story about Motley Crue and the individual band members that make it up.
I like that use of the word balls. Very good. I've said the same. This is the rise and the fall of the band Motley Crue during the 80s and the 90s. So not much more that we can really add without going into this film. Well, this one has a good story, and I'm looking forward to hearing your take on how this one's put together. Yeah,
look, obviously it's based off the autobiography book, which is basically just based off the lives of the guys from Motley Crue. So the book was called The Dirt: Confessions of the World's Most Notorious Rock Band. It was authored by Neil Strauss, but also all 4 of the band members were very much across it. And in 2006, the film adaptation rights to that book were bought out by Paramount and MTV. At the time, they had Larry Charles on board to direct the film. However, the production stalled, and in 2006, I've found a nice quote from Nikki Sixx, one of the band members, who was pretty disgruntled about where everything was going with the film, and he sort of said, "We're trying to get them out of the way to make this movie that should have been made a long time ago. MTV has been bogged down on its own way. It's a channel that used to be hip and has now actually become unhip. We signed with them because we believe they were right, but they haven't come to the table. We need to find the right partner. They are not the right partner." So scathing reports of MTV in the whole production process of this. So basically, the film just died because it seems to me that MTV, and probably Paramount as well, just didn't really come to the party with it. So in November 2013, so that's 7 years since the film adaptations were first written, the film was actually dropped by MTV and Paramount Pictures. Jeff Tremaine signed on to direct the film, which ends up directing the film. And then in January 2015, so again, another leap ahead, Focus Features picks up the right to the film. However, that languished in development hell until March 2017, and that's when Netflix came on board and bought the worldwide rights to the film. So at that time, they actually had Liam Hemsworth, Emery Cohen, and Douglas Booth in talks for the lead roles. In November of that year, Douglas Booth actually signed to star in the film, And then they ended up getting Machine Gun Kelly, Iwan Rheon, and Daniel Webber to join the cast. So after the film adaptation the adaptation rights were bought in 2006, the principal production actually started in February of 2018 in New Orleans. So a nice 12 years from when the book rights were bought. And in terms of the actual shoot, there was something quite interesting that I didn't realize, obviously, going into this, so I guess they're about a month into shooting, and one of the rigging grips from the production team, Louis DiVincenti, apologies, got an electric shock while he was de-rigging the set. He was basically passing metal pipes to another crew member. One pipe had made contact with a nearby power line, caused an electric current that arced through his body and blew out his right foot. So he actually sustained second and third degree burns over 50% of his body. He had numerous surgeries, skin grafts, and his right foot had to be amputated. So a year later, he ended up suing Netflix and Motley Crue for $1.8 million to compensate for his medical bills. So it wasn't the smooth sailing shoot they would have liked. And I'm sure $1.8 million wasn't something they were planning on budgeting for in their production budget when they started. So you're right, there is a little bit of a story on this one, and that's sort of how we got to this film being on Netflix.
Good little take there. You've touched on a lot of stuff I had as well, and I got another quote there from Nicky as well, where he says, they had that final veto on the script too, and they okayed everything because they thought it was telling their story and they wanted it to feel truthful. So it's nice to hear that the band actually still maintained a fair bit of ownership over the final film. I think the interesting thing with this too, I guess, is that the band, they did sign a contract to promise to never tour again after that farewell tour that they showed in the credits at the end of the film. Yeah. So the way they got around that of getting back together was they recorded a couple of new songs for the soundtrack for this film. However, they were meant to tour again last year, but because of the pandemic, it's been postponed. It's going to happen in 2022. But so I think they are back together. I think in a professional manner, not necessarily in a friendship sort of way. Because if you read a lot of the stories, there's still a little bit of animosity amongst a few of these band members.
Is that right?
Yeah, and a couple of other things I guess I'll just touch on is there are a lot of factual differences in this. And I think that's a lot of the criticism of this film is that there's a little creativity in some of the scenarios. And I think the one that probably stands out the most to a lot of people is the story that everyone knows about Motley Crue is Tommy Lee's marriage to Pamela Anderson, and the idea that he knew her for 4 days, married her, and they completely left this out of the story that they had kids. There was a big sex tape. There was everyone knows these stories, and he spent 6 months in prison for assaulting her as well. So I think she accused him of giving her hepatitis C as well. So it's just interesting that there is a lot of heavy stuff in this film, but there are some things that they did leave out. And I think in the show notes, I'll put a link with a whole bunch of list of differences between real life and some of the situations that didn't pan out in this one too. I think another little thing too, there's this scene, I don't know if you picked up on it, but Nicky wakes up in this hotel room with this groupie next to him, and he throws a burrito out of the bed. and according to the singer Vince, like after a night of group sex with a lot of people in the Motley Crue, that they would get burritos and rub it on their genitals to get rid of the smell before they went home to their partners. So it's just these little tiny bits that they've added in the film that actually that have taken from the book that you mentioned at the start too. I think last thing I'll mention is the different titles across the world. So in Germany it's called The Dirt. They wanted sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's a good little title. Yeah. In Greece, it was just called The Motley Crue Confess. In Hungary, it's called Dirty Rock and Roll. In Brazil, it was called The Motley Crue Confessions. In Japan, also the Motley Crue Autobiography. My favorite translation that probably didn't come across correctly is in Russia. It's called Mud. So we
don't have a word for dirt. What's the closest thing? Well, we got a word for mud.
So I thought that was quite good. You mentioned before too about that cost with the suing for the electrical rigging sort of stuff. And I guess, did you pick up on the budget for this one?
Oh, no, I didn't even look.
23.1 million. And I'm not sure whether that includes includes the cost of that suing, but it's a decent, like, for what you see, it's not too bad, I guess.
Yeah, that surprises me. I didn't even know there was a budget for this one, so I wonder how much money was burnt on this film over those 12 years as well.
Yeah, very
Mainly
true.
by Paramount and MTV.
So around the 23 million mark, some films that some recent films, I guess, is The Hate You Give, which is a nice little film if you haven't seen it, about race relations in America recently. Waterboy with Adam Sandler, Empire Strikes Back in the 70s, 80s with Star Wars, Zombieland, and Her as well. So a couple of other films that are made around this same sort of budget too. Filmed in and around New Orleans and LA, premiered in LA on the 18th of March 2019 before Netflix on the 22nd of March 2019. Did win an award too. It won the Best Music Supervision for a TV movie at the Guild of Music Supervisors Award. So it is an award-winning film.
It's an award-winning film.
To hear. Yeah. What about some consensus for this one? What have you got?
It's not too bad. It's on IMDb. It's sitting at a 7 out of 10 from 42,000 ratings. 42,000 is a big number. I think they'd be pretty happy with the eyeballs they got for this one. It's a little bit lower on Letterboxd at 3 out of 5 with nearly 31,000 ratings. But again, pretty good. They'd be pretty happy with those numbers. So from that perspective, the consensus looks all right. But what else did you find?
I'm guessing that's a good segue into Rotten Tomatoes, where the critics do not like this one. It sits at a rotten 38% on 72 reviews. So very, very low. But the audience on Rotten Tomatoes had it at 94%. And that's on over 5,000 people, which is high on Rotten Tomatoes. So that's such a big differential for Rotten Tomatoes.
There is some fan love for this film.
Yeah, 5,000. Those numbers are huge. So I guess I think I'm really intrigued to hear your thoughts for this one, because I don't know if we're going to have a similar take or not. So give me your thoughts.
I've got a few thoughts on this one. I mean, in general, I didn't mind the movie. I'm not a Motley Crue fan, and I'm not a Motley Crue fan. I certainly didn't know any of the story outside of Tommy Lee, really, and a lot of that wasn't covered that I was expecting, as you said. So I barely knew any of the other individuals. So I was coming in really fresh. But in general, the story of the characters were pretty engaging. I think with these band biopics that we see, you kind of need a steer from the director, the filmmakers, about what the story is actually about. And we've seen a lot of this kind of stuff in recent years with Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man, but also stuff like Jersey Boys, Dreamgirls, Never Tear Us Apart. They're all got the similar sort of vibe to how the film works, but is the focus going to be around the success of the band, the drugs, the members getting in the way of each other? Once you get a vibe of that, you can really settle in. And I think with this, they really wanted to basically just include everything that happened. So there was a period where like this wild party scene was the focus, and then it sort of switched to addiction and mortality, and then it sort of switched to friendships, and all the while it was sprinkled with a series of personal struggles or these events that each character had to deal with. So there's just a lot going on, and the story itself never really had a shape that I could sort of follow. It was just like watching a series of events from this band. It was almost like, and I'm not surprised that the band had their fingerprints all over it. They were like, oh, you got to put this in. Yeah, you got to put this in. You got to put this in. That's how it felt, which was still engaging enough to watch. But there was no thread for me to follow is probably the main point. But I still didn't mind it.
Yeah, that's completely fair. I think the idea of the story, being all over the shop, and it was just this retelling of events. But in saying that, like, I was in this from the get-go. I had such a fun time. Just like this lifestyle that not many people have, and I smiled the whole movie. I really enjoyed this. Really enjoyed it.
Good. I liked it too.
Good. All right, let's talk about some characters. Fill us in on who you want to start with.
I will start with Nikki Sixx, because from an overarching perspective, it's kind of Nikki Sixx's story. I mean, we touch on everyone. We're kind of introduced to the movie with Nikki, and we more or less go through it with him. So we kind of ride shotgun with him the whole way, and I'm kind of conflicted with how I feel about him, because he does some really stupid shit. He does a lot of selfish shit. He more or less comes back from it all in terms of the movie, how the movie's told. But all along, I was still kind of rooting for him, and I'm still a little bit of a loss as to why, because I think it's almost just because they introduced him as he's my man that I got to be following, and that was it. So I'm keen to hear what you think about him.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, because I think they did a really good job, like in that intro too, with these quick little one-liners about the band members. And I think he lights himself on fire. So you get that idea, like you mentioned, that he does do stupid stuff, like for the sake of doing stupid stuff. And like you mentioned, that the idea of that set up at the start of his childhood. We didn't really get to see anyone else's childhood like we did, and that idea that his father's left, the mother doesn't really care about him. I really thought that whole idea of him getting his mother arrested showed that he was pretty intelligent and smart from a young age, because he had that ability to remove himself from situations that he wasn't able to deal with. And I think that's a good follow on, where he tries to reach out with his dad, that doesn't work, and he just keeps falling deeper and deeper into this hole. And I know that all of them had these drug issues, but they highlight his drug abuse, I guess, the worst out of all of them. And it's good seeing that he hits that rock bottom, but like we see at the start, when he's a kid, he's able to work out how to get out of that hole eventually too. So yeah, interesting character that you've got this band of 4 characters, and that's the one that we have that main focus on, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. And it kind of, in almost comparison to Tommy Lee, because I kind of feel like Tommy Lee, he had a really good soul, if that even makes sense. He was really likable. He was just a bit too dumb, a bit too naive, and he kind of didn't have an off switch, but you almost couldn't offend him, and therefore it felt unfair to be offended by his antics, because anything that you did to him, he wouldn't care. So anything he did, you couldn't really care. So he was actually really, really likable, and I kind of liked that he came from this wholesome family with great parents, and he wasn't a bad dude. He was just a bit of an idiot.
Yeah, he's that, like you mentioned, that idea that he's got that almost normal family life. He's almost the one that gets them all together, I guess, as well. Is that sort of that super glue, or that joining. He's able to get them all together, and I think that throughout the film, the band's actions towards females aren't necessarily a positive thing throughout, and they do highlight a little bit of this with Tommy when he stands up for his mum, because obviously he does have that respect for his mother. But yeah, he's constantly tempted by women throughout this film, and I think that that's probably fairly true to him in real life too.
Yeah. And then you got Mick Mars. So I feel like Mick really disappeared into the background before. I don't know. Like at the start, I kind of felt like we were going to get a really good ride of his story, but then he was kind of there the whole film, not doing all the terrible stuff, but not stopping it either. He was still part of it, but not the lead in it. And apart from his sort of crippling back or hip condition that he had, we never really get into his story, which is fine, because as I said, there was enough going otherwise. But I just feel like I didn't really get to know Mick, apart from the fact that he was old, a little bit jaded, and he had a crook back.
Yeah, it's literally the same sort of stuff. You start off, you work out that he's old, he's got this disease, and then you see him at the end sort of having that operation to fix it. And apart from that, he's paying child support, and he's struggling at the start, I think, and him being a part of this band, like they try to close out on this film, it's like their family, I guess. So the one thing with him is I did not pick up on until I was reading afterwards that that's the dude from Game of Thrones. I had no idea.
Are you serious?
Dead serious. Did not pick up on it at all. I don't know what was wrong with me.
I didn't even put him in my IMDb section, because I didn't have to IMDb, because as soon as he came on, I'm like, that's bloody Ramsay Bolton.
Didn't even IMDb it, because I didn't even recognize him. So that was I was shocked. Anyway,
we got one more band member, and that's Vince. So on paper, he probably has the biggest story. If you're trying to tell a story about this band, this is the lead singer who was involved in a horrific car accident where he kills a friend, goes to jail. He goes hard into sobriety. He gets married. He has a daughter. He quits the band. He tragically loses his daughter to cancer, but it still feels like his story was second fiddle to Nikki Sixx and even Tommy Lee to an extent. But then it also kind of felt like they just didn't want to leave anything out, so they put it all in there. And as a result, I feel like we skimmed over the enormity of Vince's story, despite the fact that it was all in there. Like, this guy just goes through so much, and I kind of felt like we never got a chance to properly sympathize with him, because it was just kind of happening in the midst of Nikki having a heroin addiction, or Tommy getting married and cheating on his wife and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. This there's so much jam packed in there for Vince's story. It's mind blowing.
I literally had all those things that you listed off as the same thing. It's just like these little skating moments throughout of his story that, it doesn't really lead to much. But yeah, I guess that he's that connection to that Tommy, I guess, is that how Tommy finds him for the band. So, I don't have anything else to add on Vince. You've covered him.
But it's interesting that you say these little like fleeting moments, but they shouldn't be. Like they should be enormous moments, but they felt. Oh yes, Vince just killed a guy. Oh yeah, Vince's daughter. Like it felt like they skimmed through it a bit, but it was they're huge stuff.
Yeah, true. Any other characters that you wanted to talk about?
I kind of just wanted to touch on Tom Zutaut, who was played by Pete Davidson. And I guess he helped them get big, but he never really had a true connection with the band. And I wonder if that's a reflection of the fact that nobody really had this true connection with the band. And despite the fact they had lots of hanger-oners and people who wanted to party with them and potentially, draw from their fame and fortune, but no one really connected with these four except for these four. Even all the marriages that had all broke up. It was kind of, that goes back to the whole family thing, right? That it was just the four of them from start to finish.
And the same for their manager, Doc. I thought he was a very patient guy who they probably owe an awful lot to in getting them out of situations that they were probably too intoxicated or under the influence of something else to be able to get themselves out of. So I think he probably deserves a little bit of credit from these guys too.
He must have been on an enormous salary to continue doing that job, because it'd be so easy to be like, you know what, I am not going to do this anymore.
Yeah, and it was not, but you could see that they tried to make it out that he got that tattoo of the band, which obviously was wrong or whatever. But it's just nice to see that he obviously cared about them. It wasn't just for the money. Director Jeff Tremaine. Have you got anything interesting to share about him?
He's directed a lot of Jackass, which kind of makes sense. There's a nice lineage to some of the stuff we see on screen here. So that's kind of his go-to. He was also directed Bad Grandpa, which again is Johnny Knoxville. So he also directed a couple of 30 for 30s, which I saw. So he's obviously sort of in the game, but this is right up his alley.
Yeah, done a lot of producing work too. I think he's actually working on another Jackass film as well. So there's a fourth one coming out. So
they're still going. They must be like 70.
Yeah, I'd be very intrigued to see what the next one will show us. Wheelchair antics. All right, scene time. Give us some scenes that you enjoyed in this one.
Yeah, there's a few. You already spoke about the scene where we saw Nikki Sixx as a kid, and I like the fact they went all the way back to when he was a kid. So you do get a tiny sense of how does this person get to this point in his life, and whilst it's a 3 or 4 minute scene, you do get a vibe of it making sense, as opposed to just this guy who's called Nikki Sixx and all of a sudden wants to start a band. You do get a real setup as to why he is like that. And I think, to your point as well, he's really savvy as a kid. Because he obviously says you can either stay with your mum or you can go to a foster home. And he basically just cuts a deal with his mum. It's like, look, I won't like press charges or anything, but I'm sort of still under your guardianship, but I'm going to bugger off and do my own thing, and you just got to be all right with that, so he doesn't have to go to a home. That's kind of what happened, yeah. I like that. It's clever. So that was a good scene to start things off. I like how they respected the truth, and I know we talk about some of the things they omitted from the film, but how they respected the truth and took this sidebar whenever the story kind of strayed away from what was really happening. It was just a bit of fun, but also it felt to me like it was holding them accountable, which from the reviews, maybe they weren't as accountable as they could have been. But I do like the fact that they did, at the end of the day, a story is a story, and it's going to be told a lot better if you fake some of it. But whenever they did fake the story, they kind of called themselves out. So, and then there's kind of a bit of a change of tone for the other scenes that I like. I actually really like the car crash scene. I think despite not knowing the story, they set it up as kind of inevitable. Like, this is something bad's going to happen here. And the scene where he's kind of in a daze and imagining that his friend's sort of still alive and still talking was pretty raw. And I I think it set up a nice component of Vince's character that we sort of see for the rest of it. That was a really good scene. I also liked, because I almost disliked this scene, when obviously Nikki Sixx almost dies, and he sort of comes back and he talks about how he's like, well, I'd hit rock bottom. And I was thinking, like, this is too convenient for him to clean himself up. Just, yeah, obviously not too convenient because he almost died, but just to flick a switch and go, yeah, I'm good now. I've hit rock bottom. And then he shoots up again that night. I appreciated that it was like, it's not that easy to stop what he's doing. So I appreciated that they went to that level to explain how difficult this addiction can be. I loved the scene with Vince and his daughter in hospital when he's talking about the flower inside her. And I just, here you got this guy, we've seen all the crazy things he's done as a man, but at the end of the day, he's a father, and he does exactly what a good father would do in that situation. And that kind of ties into him after she's passed away and he's talking to her friends about her. And I love the line where he says it's against the rules of the universe to basically take someone that young. Like it was really touching. And that part of the movie really, really hit me hard. And I think that's probably why I did feel a connection with Vince's character, maybe why I did feel a bit miffed by the fact that I didn't get more of it. And then the last thing I love the final scene of them walking out on stage together. It's a little bit corny, but that kind of stuff's right up my alley. And yeah, it was kind of cool watching them just go out and do it again. After everything, they're still together. And yeah, that was a nice way to end the film.
Good. Yeah, very nice. Some scenes that you've got that I might mention in the ones that I didn't like. So
oh no.
Yeah, but we'll get to that later on, because some things that I guess that the opening montage with that conclusion of Tommy Lee and that female acquaintance creating like this fountain scenario, like that just got me straight away and shook me, and I was like, what are we watching? I couldn't believe that was on screen. And apparently, yeah, there was a bit of a groupie who, she's a real character. So I thought that was very, very interesting. The Ozzy Osbourne scene by the pool. I thought I just could not believe what was happening, like snorting ants and licking urine off the floor. Oh man, I don't know. I just thought, like, I was just like, I think the shock value of some of these scenes just really got me. And the last thing that I really liked in this too was this montage of Tommy Lee, like a day in the life on the road with him, and it just they have that camera strapped to him, and it's just like this hectic, antic day of events or night of events almost. By the time get on
wake
a plane,
up at 5 p.m.
Yeah, different city, different hotel. I thought that was really cool and well done. What are some things that you didn't necessarily like in this one?
Well, there wasn't much in terms of actual scenes. But the one scene I didn't like was the Ozzy Osbourne scene. I thought like it was almost like a name dropping scene for me. I didn't know why it was in there, and it was almost like they got to a point where like, oh, we put Ozzy Osbourne in there. Let's show you how just ridiculous this man is. And I don't know. And he's just, the ants was one thing. When he just started licking up the piss and then doing it again, it's like, I don't know. I've copped a lot in this film, and that's almost past me. Mainly because I didn't see the reason for it. So
yeah, that's fair.
And look, this isn't a scene, but one thing that annoyed me a little bit was I think I wanted to see more of them either writing songs or highlighting the genius of the band. I mean, this is a widely successful band. Like there's an assumption watching the film from me that like Nikki Sixx is kind of that genius behind the songs, and I think that if we see more of this, I can connect more to the story. And from what I'm reading, like Mick is just like an insane guitarist, and like all this sort of stuff really gets glossed over. And I guess we already had a really jam-packed enough story, as I've already spoken about, but I don't know, like we never really understood why these guys were so famous. It wasn't really covered at all. And I feel like it's important because these guys are, crazy party animals, but they're also super talented to be one of the greatest sort of rock bands of a generation. And we don't really know why.
Yeah, good points, fair points, and I think it's like what we mentioned before. Just everything's sort of like glossed over quickly because, like, you've got that Tommy Lee drumming in that rotating cage, like, like they must have put so much effort into making it, and it's like one shot. That's it. I'm like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's like think of having to, like, my head spins just
How
turning my
hard
head
would that
upside
be?
down. Yeah, anyway, yeah, good points. The, the car crash scene. Well, I think the parts you mentioned were good. The lead up to me was just too obvious and too,
Oh yeah.
like, as soon as you see them pick up the car keys and get in a car, that something bad's going to happen. So yeah, I just thought that maybe a little bit of a shock value would have been a little bit better, but maybe that's just because they've done such a good job of showing how out of control these people were in the lead up to that as well.
I think
The
I
only other,
enjoyed the cushion. I enjoyed the cushion that they gave me that I know
yeah,
this is going to happen because
it's gonna happen.
it was pretty emotional.
Yeah, and the only other thing that, yeah, Vince's kid dying, every scene in that hospital, I just thought it was, it was a bit too in your face compared to the feel of the rest of the film. You do have some heavy dark moments, but the way that this was done, I don't know whether it was the performance from the kid, but it just did not get me at all. I was like, it was
Okay.
almost too melodramatic and a bit like your soap opera sort of, death scenes.
Well, it was a
Yeah,
little bit. You're right.
yeah,
Which, yeah, it still got me.
yeah. All right. Well, what are some themes or some ideas in this one?
Oh man, where do you start? Like that, and it's good that they do cover it all, but it's also half the problem with the film is that they cover too much. Like you could argue this film is about addiction, it's about relationships and infidelity, it's about fame, it's about that rock star lifestyle. I guess the question is, are these guys the true epitome of that rock star lifestyle as well? But it's about loss, it's about brotherhood and friendship. It's about owning your own story and owning your mistakes. Man, there's so much that this is about. And whether it goes into any of them deep enough, I think you could argue addiction is a pretty big thread throughout it.
Yeah.
Um, and whether it comes around full circle, I'm not 100% sure. I know Nikki Sixx's story maybe is positive, but maybe not as well. I don't know. There's just a lot to take in, and they cover a lot, which, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. As you said, there's heaps and heaps, and I think that that addiction that you talk about too, like the abuse of so many different substances, and that idea of what is sobriety, and how do you reach that without being too self-destructive, because that's realistically what these guys were. They were on this pathway to complete and utter self-destruction. And
Yeah.
I think that the one thing they tried, I guess, and they said this right in the opening, and they said it right at the end with Nikki too, is this idea of chasing ghosts. And I think that was more Nikki's story, but this idea that what is that thing that you're after, and I think they did a nice job at the end by saying, for us, it's us as a band together, even though that may not necessarily, that's more a Hollywood style ending to put in the film. It might not
Yeah, for
necessarily
sure.
be as a band, but yeah, there's so much in this, and like you mentioned, just lots and lots.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny you mentioned about the whole addiction thing, and it's almost negligible the way they move on from that because obviously you see Nikki's rise and fall on addiction. Tommy is as much an addict as anybody in this film, and the only thing we get is when Nikki goes to rehab, they're like, "Oh, we all went to rehab." Like Tommy was just like, "Oh yeah, that sounds a great idea. Let's go to rehab." Like I feel like we should have done a little bit more about how Tommy tried to sort of move on from all this. I don't know. It's just addiction's such a big part of their story, and it was just like, oh yeah, we went to rehab and we're all pretty good after that.
Yeah,
Okay, cool. Thanks for that 12 seconds.
it was like one shot of the center, and then that was it. It was like, cool, we're done. Good. All right. What did you take away from this one?
Look, despite its disjointedness, I did enjoy riding this roller coaster. I actually enjoyed the fact that I didn't know the story and I didn't know what was coming next or where they were ultimately heading. I didn't even know right now if they were all still alive, but I enjoyed hearing a familiar song and a familiar name from time to time, so I felt like I was still in on it. I think if you're a Motley Crue fan, you could argue that maybe this would be disappointing because it is a bit all over the shop and you probably know all of these events that are happening and you potentially don't learn anything new. But my gut tells me that you'll probably enjoy it because you really don't miss that much. Everything that you've sort of read about in the papers is all there. All the stories that you wanted to hear are there. Everything in the book that you've probably read are there. And looking at those fan numbers, I'm assuming the Motley Crue fans did get behind this and did enjoy it. So it's kind of a big success for everyone who made this film. You can't really argue with that.
Yeah, I sort of lead on to that a little bit, where I was talking to a colleague at work about, watch this film. Like, we're talking about, what have you watched recently? I'm like, I watched this and I really enjoyed it. And he sort of looked at me kind of like in a disgusted sort of way. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, nah, the film's no good. He's read the book, and he said the book is amazing. And from reading this book on like the Dirt, what was it called? The Confessions of the World's Most Notorious Rock Band, the author, Neil Strauss, he said after reading this book, he's gone and read all of his books, that his writing in this book was so good. So I guess maybe I need to read this book as a follow-up, if there's better ways of telling these stories than visually. But maybe I'm intrigued to read the book. Maybe that's what I take out of this.
Well, I find it interesting that of my Letterboxd friends who have seen this film, I only had 2 who had seen it. One of them, who I haven't spoken to him, but I'm assuming he would have read the book. He's a big Motley Crue. I think he's a big Motley Crue fan. He gave it a 1 star. So there might be something in that as well. I should hit him up as to why. He might say the exact same thing.
Yeah, interesting. Did you jump onto IMDb to check anyone out for this one?
To be honest, I reckon at some point I looked at all the band members, and I don't know if that's because I was just so, we were just in this party with them from the start. Douglas Booth, who played Nicky Six, he's not in anything I've ever seen. He just reminded me so much of Darcy Moore from Collingwood, the entire film. He's got the exact same eyes as Darcy Moore, so I felt like I was watching him charging through the back line. The main one for me, though, was Doc, who was played by David Costabile. He had this really familiar face, and I couldn't figure out how I knew him. He was in a few episodes of Breaking Bad. He played Gale, who had spent some time with Walter in his lab in some of those middle seasons. And as soon as I saw that, I realized it. So it's another IMDb tick of approval that I felt satisfied when I checked it. Yeah.
Good. Big success. That's a good one. Yeah, I didn't go on. I think I was just too into this. I was just enjoying it going. This is good. Have you got any questions that you want to ask?
I do. What is your favorite movie about a band? It can be fiction or non-fiction. What's your favorite?
Ooh, it's interesting. Like, I guess the most recent one I've probably seen was Rocket Man, and I didn't mind that. That was all right.
Yep.
Probably I loved the Spice World movie.
Yes.
When we went to the movies with my mum back in the day, had it on VHS, and then even back then as a young kid, like the cameos in that, like Meatloaf was in that, and Roger Moore, and Meatloaf was the bus driver, and Roger Moore played like a James Bond type character. Richard E. Grant was like their manager. Gary Glitter did a little cameo role. Let's not talk about him, but I guess I'll go with I can even reel off those memories off my mind, so I'll go with Spice World.
When was the last time you watched Spice World?
Not that long ago, because I do have a DVD.
Excellent.
What about you? Have you got a good band movie?
Look, I actually, I really liked. I remember when I watched Dreamgirls the first time. I thought it was great, and I thought I was in awe of Jennifer Hudson back then in that film. But I actually it's a fiction band movie, but the movie Thunderstruck, Australian movie. I remember watching that at the movies and absolutely loved it. Basically about a nothing sort of band who get together they want to take their mate's ashes to where Bon Scott is buried in WA. So it was a really good movie.
Is that Stephen Curry?
Stephen Curry's in it,
yeah. I remember. Yeah, good. I think you've already touched base in a couple of parts of this already, but are you familiar with a lot of the Motley Crue music?
Yeah, enough of it. Probably more by hearing it rather than by song names. You hear the song, I know this song. I know this song.
Yeah, same. Very, very same. Anything else?
I was going to ask if you're a Motley Crue fan, but that's probably we just answered that question ourselves.
Yeah, we did. Rockstar Supernova. I just want to bring this up. Did you say there was a TV show called Rockstar? The first season was to find In Excess, and then the second season was a spin-off where they created this super group with Tommy Lee was in it.
He was, yeah,
and he was the drummer. So I just had fond memories of that, and Heater's not here, but obviously Heater was someone that used to be on this show with us a while ago. But when we were in year 12, that was our Tuesday morning chat and home group was about the episode of Supernova from the night before. So just a nice little memory of Tommy Lee in Supernova.
Yeah, Rockstar was basically like Australian or American Idol for rock. That was basically the crux of the show, right? And the band just like sat up the top and just decided who they wanted to pick as their new lead singer. It was pretty cool.
There was an Aussie in Rockstar Supernova too. This guy called Toby Rand. He had this song called "Throwing It Away," I think, or something like that.
He did. I know that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was. And I think the winner in the end was this guy called Lucas Rossi, and he's like from Iceland, possibly. Yeah, it was good memories. I wouldn't mind watching that show again. That was good fun. Tommy Lee was
Toby Rand. God, Toby Rand. I just remember Tommy Lee just sitting up there with like his legs up the whole time, just literally just like having a ball.
Good. All right. I think we're almost ready to put this one all together where we come up with a rating out of 5 for an average. So, MJ, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, look, I enjoyed it more than I thought I would, despite its flaws and the fact that the story felt pretty uncontained. And maybe that's what they wanted. Maybe that's a true reflection of the band in a sense. I connected with most of the characters and I was happy to be brought along for the ride. So for me, it's 3 stars.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't had this much fun watching a movie in quite a while, I think. So I found the stories were really entertaining, enjoyed the music, just had a really, really good time. So I'm giving it 3.5 out of 5, which gives us a 3.25 average, which is quite nice. On our Flix
Forum. Kind of the consensus from the rest of the world as well, sitting around there.
Yeah, except the critics.
Except for the critics, yeah. Screw the critics.
We are on social media. We've got Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So give us a like or a follow if you can. I just wanted to pop a question out for this week is, if you had the riches of Motley Crue, what would be your first purchase? What would be the first thing you'd buy with that cash rather than drugs, alcohol, or strippers?
Probably like property.
Yeah. Good. That's what I was like. A nice big house. That's exactly what I do. Good. I'm glad we're both on the same wavelength. So yeah, we will be back again next week with another 2019 film. It's an Indian film in the Marathi language, which I did an episode solo by myself that was in the Marathi language a couple of weeks ago. But this one is a drama. It's called 15 August. It's directed by Swapanil Jakar, and it stars Mrinmay Deshpande and Anith Kathar. So that is what we've got next week. Should be interesting. Good. Yeah.
I'm sure it'll be a change of pace again.
Yes, I'm sure it will. The subtitles will be for a different language, not for the drug abuse or the alcohol intoxication.
Yeah, and very true.
And you will be back next week.
I'll be back. Yeah, I'll be back.
Excellent. I'm loving this. So as usual, been a pleasure and good fun. And I'll see you next week.
See you then, mate.